Allah Azza wa Jal put two things in the Qur'an. When somebody translates the Qur'an, even in the best translation, at the most they will try to capture some of the message. They will try to capture some of the message. But it is impossible to capture the miracle. It's impossible. The miracle of Qur'an is only in the words of Allah. His own choice of words. That's what makes them miraculous. So if I try to tell you what an ayah means in English, or in Urdu, or any other language, I may be able to give you something about the meaning of the ayah. But I cannot display to you the beauty and the miracle of the ayah. That's impossible. That really is impossible. And I wanted to demonstrate to you, there's no board here, so this is an oral exercise actually. Let's do the oral exercise like we did this morning. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in Surah Al-Muddathir, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. The waw in the beginning is like the English capital letter. Like when you start a new sentence, you begin with capital letter. In Arabic, waw can be used for many things, over 21 things. One of them is al-isti'naf, to start a new sentence. So you could think of the waw in the beginning as a new sentence. The rest of the ayah says, رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Now listen to this carefully. What's the first letter you hear when I say رَبَّكَ? What's the first letter of the Arabic alphabet that you hear? Everybody heard the ra? رَبَّكَ. Now listen for the last letter. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the last letter you heard? Okay. Now listen carefully for the second letter. رَبَّكَ. What's the second letter? رَبَّكَ. Ba. Listen for the second last letter. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the second last letter? Ba. رَبَّكَ. What's the third letter? Kaf. رَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. What's the third last letter? You notice something? It's spelled backwards and forwards the same way. It's spelled backwards and forwards the same way. In English literature, we call this a palindrome. Something that spells backwards and forwards the same way. Like Bob or race car. Race car is an interesting palindrome in English. Allah Azza wa Jal gave our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam words that He didn't write down. وَمَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ. Allah tells him, you didn't write anything down with your hand. You don't know how to write. So this is entirely an oral exercise for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And once he says something, he doesn't edit it. He doesn't correct it. That's it. Allah revealed it and that's it. There's no, I didn't mean to say that, let me change the way I said it, etc., etc. Right? It's exactly the way Allah instructed him to recite. The challenge for mankind is, you see, the ayah, the simple translation of the ayah would be, declare the greatness only of your Lord. That would be a simple translation of وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Try to say, declare the greatness only of your Lord in English, or French, or German, or Japanese, or Chinese, or Italian, or Russian, or Urdu, or Farsi. You pick the language. Say it so that it spells backwards and forwards the same way, and say it so you only have one attempt orally. No writing down, no looking up in dictionaries. How possible is that? Subhanallah. I can translate the ayah, but could I translate the miracle in English? If I tell you, declare the greatness only of your Lord, you get some of the message, but do you get the miracle? You don't get the miracle. The miracle of Qur'an is in the Arabic language. And this is just one small example. The Qur'an, every ayah has its own miracle. Every ayah presents its own miracle. The tragedy of our times is, most people don't even know the message of Qur'an. And for the people who know the message of Qur'an, the vast majority of them don't know the miracle of Qur'an. And the Qur'an is, again, two things at the same time, right? It's a message and a miracle. Two things at the same time. So this is something that's almost lost, a treasure that's lost from the general knowledge of the Muslim population. And just imagine, if our children even knew 5 ayat. They memorize Surah Al-Ikhlas, they memorize Surah Al-Kawthar, they memorize these surahs. If they knew those 5 ayat and they knew what they meant, and then they knew the miracle in those ayat, wouldn't they have a different kind of iman in those ayat? They would mean something more to them. This is why you see a difference between our iman and the iman of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhu ajma'in. One of the reasons, among the many reasons, is that when they heard Qur'an, they heard the message and they also heard miracle. They heard two things at the same time. We, at the most, we hear one thing. At the most, we hear one thing. So this is one reason to definitely be a student of the Arabic language. Because we want to appreciate the Qur'an and its message, and we also want to taste the beauty of its miracle. I want to give you a simple example just on the side as an argument. Many of you have read poetry, some of you not because you wanted to, but because it was part of your class, you had to read it. Or you had to read some literature like Shakespeare. Those of you that speak Urdu may have read Iqbal or Ghalib or something, right? You've read poetry and song and artistic literature in different languages. When you translate a poem from one language to another, when you translate Shakespeare from English to Urdu, or you translate Iqbal to English, does it have the same beauty? The word of a human being loses its beauty when translated from one language to another. And I'm not talking about the meaning, I'm just talking about the beauty, because poetry is about beauty, isn't it? What's lost is the beauty. We're talking about the word of Allah. Can there be any doubt in the beauty of those words? And when we translate the word of Allah, do you think there's going to be a loss in beauty? To describe this loss in beauty, As-Suyuti rahimahullah gave a beautiful example. He gave a parable. As-Suyuti rahimahullah was one of the first scholars to write on the sciences of the Qur'an, Al-Itqan fi ulum al-Qur'an. And he says, if someone can imagine the distance between the Creator and the creation, imagine how above Allah is from His creation, then you can begin to imagine the distance between the words of the Creator and the words of the creation. Qur'an is the word of the Creator. The translation is the word of the creation. Is there a distance? SubhanAllah. How can you say one substitutes for the other? You can't, there's no room to make that argument. So this is the first point. This is just the first point. The miracle of Qur'an is lost. The second point is, Allah Azza wa Jal in the Qur'an says the word Qur'an, He uses the word Qur'an with the word Arabi. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا غَيْرَ ذِي عِوَجٍ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ أَوْ يُحْدِثُ لَهُمْ ذِكْرًا. Allah Azza wa Jal says, بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ. 11 times in the Qur'an, Allah describes the Qur'an as what? Arabic. Every Muslim believes that every word in the Qur'an is exactly from Allah. You can't add to it, you can't take away from it. If Allah describes the Qur'an as Al-Qur'an Al-Hakim, like in Surah Yasin, وَالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ, the Qur'an full of wisdom. We can never separate wisdom and Qur'an because Allah put them together. When Allah says Qur'anan Arabiyyan, what two things can we never separate? Qur'an and Arabi. Did Allah put them together? We can't separate them. And on top of that, He said, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. In simple English, we, without a doubt, we're the ones who sent down an Arabic Qur'an, so you can understand. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. So if Allah put understanding next to not just Qur'an, what did Allah put understanding next to? The Arabic Qur'an. So a key in understanding the Qur'an is what? The Arabic language. This was my second point. How many times does Allah mention Arabic in Qur'an? 11 times. The third point is what is lost in translation besides the beauty. I gave the same example in the morning, I'll give you the same example now inshallah. The word nafs. The word nafs. You've heard that word before? The word ruh. Have you heard the word ruh before? I'm going to recite to you two ayat. One of them has the word nafs in it, the other has the word ruh in it. Allah says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Which word did you hear? Everybody heard the word nafs? Then Allah says in Surah Al-Isra, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. Which word did you hear? Al-ruh. The average English translation of كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ is, every soul shall taste death. Tell me what English word was used for nafs. Every soul shall taste death. What word? Soul. When Allah Azza wa Jal says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ, the translation says, they ask you about the soul. They ask you about the soul. Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah make you an awesome basketball player. Football? Okay, yeah, you guys are big on football. Anyway, they ask you about the soul. So there are two words in Arabic, nafs and ruh. How many words in English? Ruh, soul. Allah said two things, and the translator has no choice in English but to say one thing, soul. So if you and I are thinking that we have an accurate understanding of what Allah says, reading the English or Urdu or any other translation, we're definitely missing something. The Arabic language is very, very, very deep. I can't begin to tell you how deep because I don't even know how deep it is. I'm a student myself. But I can tell you this. Allah says ins for human beings. He says insan for human beings. He says anasi for people. He says nas for people. He says bashar for people. He says insiya in Surah Maryam for people. All of these for human beings, right? All of these words? When you translate all of them, what do you get? Human being. But Allah used like a dozen different words. If Allah chose to use a different word, does it mean something different? Because if it meant the same thing, Allah would say the same thing. The Arabic language for one word has 12 different uses. There are 10 different kinds of anger. There are a dozen different kinds of just seeing. Different kinds of sabr and patience. Different words for it. And Allah uses different words in different places. I'll tell you this. There's another interesting example of this vocabulary issue. Allah Azza wa Jal sometimes uses the word qalb. Many of you know what qalb means. What does it mean? Qalb is translated heart. Sometimes Allah uses the word fu'ad. How does fu'ad get translated? Heart. Actually heart. If you look at the Lisan al-Arab, Ibn Manzur's lexicon, heart. So Allah uses qalb and Allah uses fu'ad. Thabbit qulubana. Thabbit qulubana. With ithbat, what did Allah use? Or tathbit rather, qulub. لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ fu'adak. What did He use that time? Fu'ad. Sometimes qalb, sometimes fu'ad. And both times the translation in English says what? Heart. Now look at this ayah. I believe it's in Surah Al-Qasas. فَأَصْبَحَ فُؤَادُ أُمِّ مُوسَى فَارِغًا. Which word did Allah use? Fu'ad or qalb? You heard the word fu'ad? Read the rest of the ayah. لَوْلَا أَنْ رَبَطْنَا عَلَىٰ قَلْبِهَا. What word is this one? Same ayah. Beginning of it used fu'ad. The latter part of it used qalb. When you read the translation, both of them get translated heart. Allah didn't mean the same thing. Because had He meant the same thing, He would have said the same thing. Those of you that take the course when it comes, I'll solve this riddle for you then, inshallah. I'll keep you thirsty until then a little bit. But this, we need to build a thirst for the choices of words Allah makes. Because they're so precise. And it is impossible to pick another language that can do justice to that precision. It's very difficult. Even if you translate one word for anger as fear, ghadab for example, you take it and you translate it as anger. And another Arabic word for anger, you translate it as rage. Most people, do they know the difference between anger and rage? Same thing to us, right? He was full of anger, he was full of rage. I mean, we use these words interchangeably. The Arabic axiom is there is no one word that is the perfect substitute for another word. Every word has its own connotation. Every word has its own little taste. So Allah's words are very difficult to communicate in another language. The most you can get is some general idea. But if you want to get precise, we need to resort back to the Arabic language. This was my third point in regards to vocabulary.